The grand hall shimmered with golden lights, filled with whispers and laughter from both humans and wolves mingling uneasily. Liana, a young Omega, walked cautiously among the crowd, keeping her head high despite the heavy weight of judgment in every gaze. She knew being an Omega made her vulnerable, but nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen. Suddenly, a group of wolves from a rival pack cornered her, their laughter echoing through the room. One of them shoved her slightly, and before she could react, a glass of red wine toppled onto her pristine white dress, staining it immediately. The hall erupted in cruel laughter. Liana's heart sank, her cheeks burning with humiliation. In a shadowed corner of the room, golden eyes watched. He, tall, commanding, radiating power, felt every ounce of her shame as his own. His jaw tightened. No one, he thought, would dare disrespect his mate without consequence. Liana tried to wipe the stain, swallowing back tears, unaware of the figure observing her from the darkness. That man, whose presence alone exuded dominance, was the alpha king of the territory, and his protective instincts had just been triggered. The tension in the room became palpable. A chill ran down the spines of those present, though none knew why. This small act of cruelty, seemingly harmless, was about to ignite a series of events filled with danger, intrigue, and the awakening of a bond stronger than any force in the room. The laughter of the gala faded into the background, replaced by a tense, almost electric silence that seemed to hum around Liana. Her dress was ruined, her pride wounded, and every eye in the room seemed to weigh her down with judgment. She wanted nothing more than to disappear, to escape into the night and pretend this nightmare had never happened. But before she could take a step toward the exit, a shadow moved across the hall with a grace so commanding it stopped even the loudest chatter. It was him, the man with the golden eyes. The Alpha King, though unknown to her, was already taking action. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. Every step he took radiated authority, sending subtle waves of unease through those who had dared humiliate her. He approached Liana slowly, his presence alone parting the crowd like a current through water. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, as though reality itself acknowledged his power. The bullies who had targeted her felt a strange pull of fear tightening their chests. "You okay?" he asked, his voice deep, calm, yet carrying a force that made her heart skip a beat. He offered her a hand, but his eyes, golden, intense, seemed to look straight into her soul. Liana hesitated, torn between fear and instinctual trust she didn't yet understand. Something in him felt protective, undeniable, like a storm waiting to shield her from harm. Slowly, she took his hand, feeling a surge of warmth and power that left her breathless. The Alpha King didn't just stand there. He moved subtly, his presence a silent warning. The bully's laughter faltered as he approached them, his gaze cold and unyielding. One of them tried to shrug it off, but when their eyes met his, a shiver ran down their spine. It wasn't just authority. It was the unmistakable aura of a predator ready to protect what was his. Liana, standing beside him, realized she had never felt safer in her life, but the tension in the room lingered. The Alpha King sensed it too, the invisible threads of danger winding through the crowd, whispers of threats she couldn't see. Someone had orchestrated this public humiliation, and he intended to find out who. As the night continued, subtle glances followed them, Whispers in the corners hinted that the incident was not random. Someone wanted Liana humiliated, controlled, or perhaps tested. And while the Alpha King had intervened, the shadow of danger had only grown longer, more intricate. By the time the gala drew to a close, Liana had discovered something undeniable. She was no ordinary Omega, and he was no ordinary Alpha. Their bond, though unspoken, had already begun to ignite, a quiet yet undeniable flame that would guide them through the darkness approaching. And somewhere in the shadows, the true threat waited, watching, patient, and ready to strike. The gala was over, but the tension it left behind lingered like a shadow over Liana's thoughts. She returned to her modest apartment, her mind a whirlwind of shame, relief, and curiosity. The Alpha King had saved her, yes, but who was he? And why did she feel a strange, almost magnetic pull toward him, as if an invisible thread connected them? The city outside was quiet, but Liana sensed movement in the darkness. It started subtly, a shadow flickering across the street, a distant rustle that didn't belong to the night wind. She dismissed it at first, blaming her imagination. Yet the uneasy feeling in her stomach refused to vanish. Meanwhile, somewhere in the depths of the territory, golden eyes watched. The Alpha King had not left her side entirely. Even from a distance, he observed her, aware of every subtle shift in her surroundings. He could sense a presence lingering near her apartment, someone moving with patience and intent, someone who did not want her safe. That night, Liana awoke to a faint sound, scratches at the window, almost imperceptible, yet sharp enough to make her pulse quicken. Her Omega instincts tingled. She knew danger was near. Height hammering, she tiptoed to the window, peering into the darkness. There was nothing, but instinct told her someone had been there. The Alpha King, ever vigilant, appeared silently outside her door, his form emerging from the shadows like a guardian spirit. "You were followed," he said, his voice a calm storm that somehow reassured and frightened her all at once. "And they are clever, much more clever than I expected." Liana shivered. Who are they?" she whispered. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he surveyed the room with predatory precision, every muscle coiled and ready. "Someone wants to humiliate you. Someone wants to test you, and me. This was not a random act at the gala. They are planning something far more dangerous." Her pulse raced as dread settled over her like a heavy cloak. She was not just a victim of cruel fun anymore. She was a target. And the more she realized this, the more the threads of danger seemed to entwine around her life, invisible yet suffocating. Over the next few days, small incidents began to pile up. Letters slipped under her door, cryptic warnings in shadows, glimpses of figures vanishing before she could confront them. Each event was minor on its own, almost ignorable, but together they formed a chilling pattern. Someone was meticulously observing her, studying her every move. The Alpha King grew restless. He knew that the person behind these acts was not just cruel. They were calculating, intelligent, patient. He began to set subtle traps, shadowing her movements, analyzing every interaction in search of the predator hiding in plain sight. Meanwhile, Liana felt the stirrings of her own power, and Omega's intuition sharpening in response to the threat. Fear was no longer paralyzing. It was teaching her to see, to sense, to anticipate. With each passing hour, the bond between her and her Alpha deepened, unspoken but undeniable, a tether that would guide them both through the unseen dangers closing in around them. And somewhere beyond the edges of her perception, unseen eyes continued to watch. The hunter was patient. The game had just begun. Days passed after the unsettling events near her apartment, and Liana's world had shifted into a fragile, tense rhythm. Every step she took, every shadow she passed, carried the weight of invisible threats. She had begun to sense danger everywhere, yet never had she imagined that the man who had saved her at the gala, the one whose golden eyes haunted her thoughts, would soon become more than just a mysterious protector. It was a quiet evening when he finally approached her again, appearing at her door as silently as a ghost. His presence was overwhelming, filling the small room with an unspoken authority that made her heart race. "Liana," he said softly, but there was a steel edge beneath the gentleness of his voice. "It's time you knew the truth." She froze, her chest tightening. "The truth about what?" she asked, her voice trembling, though curiosity gnawed at her from inside. He stepped closer, the dim lamplight casting shadows across his sharp features. "About who I am, and who you are to me." Liana blinked. The words hung in the air, electric and heavy. She felt the pull of something primal, ancient, stronger than any fear she had known. "I don't understand." "You are my Omega," he said, his voice low, resonant, and certain, "and I am your mate." Her mind spun. Mate? Omega? These were not words she had expected to hear. Certainly not in this context, not from a man whose mere presence had both terrified and enthralled her. Her pulse thundered, and a strange warmth began to bloom from within her. A mix of fear, recognition, and something else, a connection she could not deny. "You're the Alpha King?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," he replied, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made the air feel charged. "I am the Alpha of this territory, and I've been watching over you, protecting you from the moment I sensed you were in danger." A revelation hit her like a storm. The man she had thought was merely a protector, someone shrouded in mystery, was the most powerful alpha in the region, and he had chosen her as his mate. Her mind raced with questions, but instinctively, she knew that his claim was not just about power. It was about something deeper, a bond written in the language of their kind, ancient and unbreakable. But as awe and fear battled within her, the Alpha's expression darkened. "There are those who wish to hurt you, Liana. The humiliation at the gala was just the beginning. They are clever, patient, and dangerous. I cannot let them succeed." He reached out, taking her hand gently. "We will face this together. I will not let anyone harm you. Not now, not ever." Her heart pounded, both from fear and from something deeper. Desire, recognition, a pull she could not resist. She felt her own strength stirring, the Omega power she had only vaguely sensed before, now awakening fully. The bond between them hummed, a silent current of protection, power, and unspoken promise. But outside, the shadows moved with quiet patience. The person orchestrating her humiliation and threats was still out there, observing, calculating, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Liana realized, with a shiver of both fear and excitement, that her life had changed forever. She was no longer merely a victim. She was a mate, an Omega, and the target of a cunning adversary who would test every ounce of courage and trust she possessed. And with the Alpha King by her side, She knew the next steps would demand strength, cunning, and an unbreakable bond, because the danger closing in around them was far more complex and deadly than either of them could have imagined. The full moon hung high over the territory, its silver light casting long shadows through the forest that bordered Liana's small apartment. The night was alive with whispers, the soft rustle of leaves, and distant howls reminding her that danger was never far. Since the Gawa, Liana had not slept well. Her mind was a tangle of fear, curiosity, and the growing, undeniable pull toward the Alpha King, who now claimed her as his mate. That evening, the Alpha King, Kale, insisted on accompanying her for a walk through the moonlit woods. "You need to learn to trust your instincts," he said, his golden eyes scanning the trees. "The one who is after you is clever, a watch. They wait, and they exploit any weakness." Rihanna shivered, though not just from the cool night air. Her omega senses had begun to sharpen, reacting to subtle movements and sounds she had once ignored. She noticed footprints in the soft earth, small disturbances in the leaves, a faint scent that did not belong to any creature she knew. Someone had been here. Someone had been studying her. Kale's gaze darkened as he noticed her tension. "You are not imagining it," he said. "They are close. They've been preparing for months, watching you, learning your routines. Whoever they are dangerous, and they have a reason for targeting you specifically." Her heart thumped. "Why me?" she whispered, almost to herself. "I'm just an Omega. I don't understand why anyone would—" Kale stopped, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "It's not just about being an Omega. It's about you, Liana. About your bloodline, your connection. The same reason you are mine to protect. They want to control what you are, or eliminate it." The words hung heavy between them. Liana felt a mixture of fear and awe. She had always sensed she was different, that something about her set her apart, but she had never imagined the truth carried so much danger. As they moved deeper into the forest, Kale's senses alert, Liana felt her own awakening more strongly. She could feel the life around her, the subtle heartbeat of the earth, the faint vibrations of movement, the tension of unseen eyes. Her instincts guided her, sharpening like blades in the darkness, teaching her that the enemy was near and watching. Suddenly, a faint rustle from the underbrush made them freeze. Kale's hand went to the hilt of a knife at his side, his body coiled like a spring ready to strike. The sound came again, closer, deliberate. Someone was following them. Someone skilled, patient, and silent. Kale's golden eyes narrowed. "They're testing us," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "They want to see how you react, how we react together. This is only the beginning. Whoever it is, they will not stop until they understand everything about us." Liana swallowed hard, feeling both fear and a strange thrill. This was no ordinary threat. The criminal was intelligent, methodical, and obsessed. The thought sent a shiver through her spine. But at the same time, she felt a bond with Kale growing stronger. He wasn't just her protector. He was her mate, her guide, and the only one who could stand against the shadows closing in around her. The moonlight shone down as they continued their walk, casting silver streaks through the trees. Rihanna realized that nothing would ever be simple again. Her life, her identity, and her newfound connection to Kale were all entwined in a dangerous game. A game where every secret revealed, every shadow exposed, brought them closer to the predator lurking in the darkness, and to the truth that could either save them or destroy them completely. And somewhere in the stillness beyond the reach of the moonlight, a pair of cold, calculating eyes watched their every move, patient, waiting, and already planning the next move in a deadly, intricate game. The days that followed the moonlit walk were anything but peaceful. Liana tried to continue her life, but every glance over her shoulder, every shadow in the corner of her vision, reminded that someone was lurking, waiting, and watching. The Alpha King Kale remained ever vigilant, his golden eyes scanning every street, alley, and room as if he could see through the darkness itself. Even in the safety of her apartment, Liana could feel the tension. Notes slipped under her door, letters written in jagged handwriting, cryptic messages that seemed almost playful, yet carried a sinister edge. You can't hide forever. Each one left her trembling, unsure if the threat was meant for fear, manipulation, or something darker. Kale instructed her to stay inside while he patrolled the territory. "I cannot always be beside you," he said, his voice firm but layered with concern. "But your senses are awakening, Liana. You can feel them coming before they arrive. Trust yourself." She tried, but the whispers in the shadows grew bolder. At the market, a figure brushed past her, leaving a faint, chilling scent in the air. On the street, footsteps echoed too deliberately behind her, always stopping when she turned. Someone was playing with her, testing her limits, and she was both terrified and furious. Kale returned each night with a quiet fury, his instincts flaring. "They are learning your patterns," he said, pacing in her living room. "Every movement, every routine, every small detail about you, they record it, analyze it. Whoever this is, they are clever, patient, and relentless. This is more than mere cruelty. It's obsession." Liana shivered, but felt a growing sense of power as well. Her Omega abilities had strengthened. She could sense more now, catch fleeting impressions, detect subtle shifts in the environment. Every shadow carried a whisper, every gust of wind a warning. She was beginning to understand that fear could be a weapon, and knowledge could be a shield. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a shadow detached from an alley across the street. Liana felt it before she saw it, the unmistakable presence of a predator studying her from afar. Her heart pounded, but instead of fleeing, she stood her ground, eyes narrowing, Omega senses flaring. Kale, who had followed silently, placed a protective hand on her shoulder. "Do not panic," he murmured. "Let them come closer. We will learn who they are, and when the time is right, we will confront them." For hours, the figure lingered, moving subtly, leaving only faint traces. A misplaced leaf, a disturbed pebble, the faintest scent of leather and danger. And then, as mysteriously as they had appeared, they vanished into the night. Kale's expression was grim. "This is no longer just about humiliation," he said. "They want to manipulate, to provoke, and perhaps to trap us. Whoever it is, they are planning something larger, something we haven't seen yet." Liana's mind raced. She could feel the tension in the air, the invisible threads of a dangerous game being woven around them. Fear had become a companion, but so had determination. She was learning that the shadows carried secrets, and that every secret revealed could bring them closer to the predator lurking in plain sight. That night, As the wind whispered through the trees and the moonlight painted silver streaks across the walls, Liana and Kale sat together, bound by more than just instinct. The danger was real, but so was their connection. And in the darkness beyond their reach, the criminal observed silently, patient, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, unaware that every move they made was now being watched as closely as they had watched their prey. The tension in the territory had reached a breaking point. Liana had begun to understand that the shadows following her were not random. They were precise, calculated, a puzzle being pieced together by a mind as cunning as it was cruel. Kale, her alpha, had intensified his vigilance, patrolling the streets, scrutinizing every interaction, every new face, and every rumor that drifted through the packs. But even he admitted that the enemy was cleverer than anticipated. "It's time," Kale said one evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in a deep crimson. "To seek help beyond what we can handle alone." Liana's brow furrowed. "Help? Who could possibly understand this danger better than you?" Kale's golden eyes darkened. "Not all allies are obvious. Some are uneasy companions. But in times like this, we cannot afford pride. We need every resource, every intelligence. The one following you is skilled. They have patience, power, and cunning, and patience is dangerous in the wrong hands." Liana nodded. Sensing the seriousness in his tone, her own instincts told her that Kale's decision was correct, though the idea of involving someone else brought unease. Trust was not something easily given, especially when shadows could mask betrayal. By nightfall, Kale led her to a secluded clearing deep in the forest, where the scent of pine and damp earth mingled with the crisp night air. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall, lean, with eyes that glimmered like steel. Liana tensed immediately, sensing the power and the caution radiating from the stranger. "This is Kalen," Kale introduced, his voice firm but controlled. "He's a tracker, a shifter with skills that rival even my own in some ways. He knows the territory, the unseen movements, and he can help us." Kalen bowed slightly, eyes scanning Liana as if evaluating her soul. "I've been informed," he said evenly, "that someone is targeting you specifically. Young Omega. Their methods are not reckless. They are deliberate. I am here to ensure you survive long enough for the Alpha to find them." Liana's pulse quickened. There was something in Kalen's presence. Reliable yet unnerving, protective yet sharp-edged, that reminded her of the predator they hunted. She had to remind herself that this alliance was necessary. Over the next several nights, the trio began to weave a delicate, dangerous web. Kalen moved silently, tracing movements in the shadows, analyzing patterns, and mapping possible routes the unseen enemy might take. Kale remained the commanding force, leading Liana and Kalen through scenarios of both training and tactical observation. But as the days progressed, tension surfaced. Kalen's methods were sometimes ruthless, pushing Liana and even Kale to the brink of their patience. Arguments flared, though always under the current of mutual respect. Yet beneath the surface, an invisible thread of unease tugged at Liana, the instinctive feeling that Kalen, despite his loyalty, had his own secrets. One night, during a surveillance session on the outskirts of the city, a figure emerged from the shadows, familiar, calculating, almost taunting in their movements. The enemy had left a deliberate trail, a challenge. Liana's Omega senses flared, warning her that this confrontation was imminent. Kale's jaw tightened. They're getting bolder, he murmured. They want to test us, to see if we can anticipate their moves. And they're clever. Very clever. This is no longer a game of simple attacks. This is a strategic war. And they are several steps ahead. Liana, standing between her alpha and the tracker, felt her power rising, her senses sharpening to every subtle vibration of the ground, every scent carried by the wind. She was no longer just a prey. She was learning to anticipate, to see the threads of the predator's plan as they unraveled in slow, deliberate movements, as the night deepened and the shadows stretched like fingers across the clearing. Liana realized something chilling. Alliances could save lives, but trust could be a double-edged blade. Kale and Kaelin were her protectors, yet the predator's patience ensured that no one was entirely safe. The game had escalated, and the Omega knew, with an unshakable certainty, that the next moves would decide who would survive, and who would fall into the darkness, and somewhere beyond the circle of moonlight. Unseen eyes waited, calculating, observing, and already planning their next cruel test, confident that even the strongest alliances could falter when fear and desire collided. The tension in the territory had reached an almost unbearable point. Every shadow seemed alive, every whisper of wind carried the hint of unseen eyes. Liana's Omega senses were sharpened to the maximum, each nerve alert, every instinct screaming that danger was closing in. But the predator remained frustratingly elusive. Kale and Kaelin had been relentless in their efforts, tracing patterns, observing routines, and attempting to predict the enemy's moves. Yet each weed dissolved into a dead end, each clue seeming to misdirect rather than illuminate. It was as if the criminal were always one step ahead, calculating, mocking them from the shadows. "This is unlike anything I've seen before," Kale muttered one night, as they sat in the high tower of the Alpha's stronghold. Overlooking the city, his golden eyes scan the streets below, sharp and unwavering. Every time we think we've cornered them, they vanish. They are clever, patient, and organized, and they are targeting you specifically. Liana felt her pulse quicken. She had grown stronger, more perceptive, but the frustration of not seeing the enemy gnawed at her. "Why do they keep doing this? What do they want from me?" she asked. Her voice trembling, though her resolve was strong. Kaelin leaned forward, his gaze hard and analytical. "It's not just about you, Omega. It's about power, manipulation, and control. They are testing your reactions, your instincts. They want to see how far we will go to protect you. Every move we make, every step is being watched. And that means we need to adapt faster than they do." The nights became longer, the days shorter. Each filled with tension, Liana trained with Kale, honing her Omega senses, learning to detect the smallest shifts in air pressure, the faintest scent of danger, and the tiniest tremor in the ground. Every movement, every sound, every instinct became a weapon, a shield, a warning system that might keep her alive. Yet despite their combined efforts, the enemy remained a ghost. Someone left cryptic messages, manipulated small events to provoke fear, and tested their reactions, always careful, always precise. The deeper Liana and Kale dug, the more tangled the web became. It was no longer a simple hunt. It was a complex game of strategy. Observation and patience. One evening, as the moon cast silver streaks across the Alpha's stronghold, a subtle sign caught Liana's attention. A barely visible mark on a lamppost she passed during her patrol. Her Omega instincts flared, recognizing the faint scent of leather and a signature she had felt before. Someone had been here, leaving a trace that only she could detect. Kale noticed her tense posture immediately. "What is it?" he asked. Voice sharp. "They were here," Liana whispered, pointing to the mark. "They're leaving clues, but it's deliberate. It's a challenge." Talen's expression darkened. "Exactly. They want us to follow. To engage, to reveal our tactics. And when we do, they will be ready for the next step. This is the kind of mind we are dealing with. A predator who thrives on manipulation and psychological warfare." Liana swallowed, her fear coiling tightly in her chest. But beneath it was a spark of determination. She was no longer the powerless Omega from the gala. She was awake, alert, and bonded to the most powerful Alpha in the territory. They would face this together, and she would no longer be merely prey. As the three of them prepared to follow the subtle trail left by the unseen enemy, a chilling realization settled over Liana. The web had tightened. And every move they made was being anticipated. One wrong step, one misjudgment, and the predator would strike. And somewhere in the darkness, beyond the edge of sight, the criminal watched. They were confident, patient and cunning, fully aware that their prey was growing stronger, but relishing the game regardless. The shadows seemed to pulse with anticipation, and Liana felt a shiver run down her spine. The hunt had only just begun. And the stakes were higher than ever before. The tension that had been simmering for weeks reached a breaking point. Liana could feel it in the very air of the territory. The subtle shift in energy, the uneasy glances exchanged among pack members. The whispers that seemed to brush against her ears when no one was near. Something had changed. Someone close had begun to move against them. Kale, ever vigilant, had sensed it first. His golden eyes, sharp and piercing, caught inconsistencies in the pack's behavior, tiny deviations in routine. A pack member lingering too long where they shouldn't be, a suspicious absence that didn't add up. Liana had noticed it too, but only now did she understand the truth. The predator had infiltrated their ranks. It began subtly. Supplies went missing. Patrol schedules were altered without explanation, and key information that Kale had shared with trusted pack members seemed to leak to unknown parties. Kalen was the first to voice suspicion aloud. "Someone is feeding them information," he said one night. His voice low and hard, eyes scanning the shadows outside their training ground, were being played from within. Liana felt her pulse quicken. The idea that danger came not only from the outside, but from within the very pack, meant that the stakes had become impossibly higher. Whoever had betrayed them knew the territory, knew the routines, and had intimate knowledge of their defenses. The predator was no longer an invisible force lurking in the shadows. They had a pawn inside. Someone close enough to manipulate and mislead. Kale's anger was palpable. He had always commanded respect, loyalty, and obedience from his pack. Yet this betrayal stung deeper than any external threat. "We will find them," he said. His voice tight, controlled. "No one in my territory harms my mate. No one." But the hunt for the betrayer was complex. Every accusation could fracture the pack further. Liana, though terrified, understood that her growing instincts as an Omega were now more crucial than ever. She began to sense subtle shifts in the atmosphere, the quiet fear of those hiding secrets, the tension in their breathing, the micro-expressions that betrayed guilt. One evening, Kale led her and Kalen to a hidden part of the forest, a place only trusted pack members knew. "Tonight," he said, "we uncover the traitor." They moved silently, every step measured. Liana felt her senses extending, picking up the faintest traces of movement. Scent and sound. A shadow darted between the trees, a figure trying to evade detection. She tensed, knowing instinctively that this was no ordinary pack member. It was the betrayer, and they had underestimated her. Kale's growl rolled through the night, deep and threatening. The figure froze. "You thought you could hide?" Kale demanded, his presence dominating the clearing. The betrayer's mask slipped. Fear flashed in their eyes, quickly replaced by defiance. "You don't understand," they shouted. "I had no choice. They made me do it." Liana's omega senses flared, reading the tension, the lies, and the fear. The traitor's words were a mixture of truth and deception, carefully crafted to sow doubt and confusion. Kalen stepped forward, voice cold and cutting. "There are no excuses for endangering the mate of the Alpha King," he said. "No one here is above the consequences." A confrontation escalated, a clash of power and will. The traitor lunged, attempting to escape, but Kale's speed and strength were unmatched. In a blur of motion, he blocked the path, his dominance undeniable. Liana's heart raced as the Omega bond flared, intertwining with Kale's power, lending them both clarity, focus, and instinctual precision. Finally, the betrayer fell to their knees, defeated and exposed. Kale's golden eyes bore into them. "You have endangered lives," he said slowly, every word heavy with warning. "This ends now. You will not harm my mate again." As the night settled and the tension dissipated, Liana realized the truth of their situation. The danger was multifaceted, coming from both outside and within. The predator who had humiliated her, stalked her, and orchestrated these events was clever. Yes, but so was the bond she shared with Kale. Together, they had not only survived, but had begun to turn the tide. Yet, even in this victory, a deeper sense of foreboding lingered. The betrayer had been a key piece in a larger game. And the criminal, pulling the strings from the shadows, remained at large, patient, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. Liana shivered, aware that the next confrontation would be even more dangerous. But for the first time, she also felt a sense of growing power, trust, and unshakable resolve. She was no longer just an Omega in peril. She was part of a force that could challenge even the darkest and most cunning predator. The wind howled like a living creature across the jagged cliffs at the edge of the territory. The moon hung low and heavy, casting silver light over the rocky outcrop where Liana and Kale had tracked a lead from the shadows. Every instinct screamed that danger was near, and this time it was not a test or a shadow in the night. This was the predator itself, finally daring to reveal part of its plan. Liana's heart pounded. She had grown stronger, more attuned to the currents of danger around her, yet the tension of the night pressed against her chest like iron. Kale moved beside her with the quiet precision of a predator. His golden eyes scanning the cliffs, every crevice and shadow. Kalen followed, silent, tense, his eyes never leaving the edges of the terrain. "They're here," Kale murmured, his voice a low growl. "I can feel it. They're trying to provoke us, to see how far we'll go. And they're dangerous, more so than we've realized until now." The first signs came in subtle whispers of movement. Pebbles shifted in the darkness. A shadow slipping across the rocks, too calculated to be a mere animal. Liana's Omega senses flared, warning her of every heartbeat, every footstep that did not belong. The predator was testing them, drawing them in with precision and patience. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, masked in black, movements sleek and controlled. Liana's breath caught, her body coiled with tension. She knew instinctively that this was no ordinary foe. The presence radiated intellect and deadly intent. "You've come," the figure said, voice smooth, taunting, carrying an edge of amusement. "I wondered how long it would take before you followed the trail." Kale's growl rolled through the night, deep and resonant. "You've endangered lives for too long," he said. "This ends now." The predator laughed softly, a sound that carried across the cliffs. "Do you think you can stop me? I've been planning this long before you knew her name." The tension erupted into motion. Kale lunged forward, muscles coiled, every movement precise and lethal. Liana felt her omega bond flare, a surge of power and connection to Kale that sharpened her senses to razor-like clarity. She could feel his intentions, anticipate his strikes, and support him instinctively. Kalen moved from the flank, his own movements calculated, cutting off escape routes, reading the predator's patterns with a hunter's eye. Liana realized the predator had underestimated their unity, their bond, and their growing understanding of one another. The fight was a blur of motion, shadows, and sparks of power. Rocks shifted and clattered under the intensity of the confrontation. The predator, cunning and agile, forced Kale to push beyond normal limits, testing his patience, strength, and strategy. Liana's instincts guided her to anticipate threats, warn Kale, and even create openings that allowed him to corner the enemy. And then, at the edge of the cliffs, a critical moment arrived. The predator made a desperate leap, a maneuver designed to escape or gain the advantage, but Kale was faster. With a powerful surge, he blocked the path, forcing the enemy into a narrow crevice. Trapped, Liana's heart raced as Kalen moved to secure the figure, ensuring no escape. The predator's mask fell, revealing a face Liana recognized from subtle clues she had ignored for too long. The mastermind behind the threats, the humiliation, and the tests. Their eyes, cold and calculating, met Kale's golden gaze. "This isn't over," they spat, a mix of fury and fear. Kale's voice was like iron. "It is over for now. You will not harm my mate, not ever." The predators struggled, but found themselves ensnared by the careful coordination of Kale, Liana, and Kalen. The hunt, patience, and bonds they had cultivated had finally brought them to the precipice of victory. As the wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of salt and earth, Liana realized something profound. Danger could be cunning, betrayal could be close, and the world was filled with shadows. But together, bonded and alert, they could face anything. The predator was cornered, the immediate threat neutralized, but the adrenaline, the lessons, and the deepening bond between Alpha and Omega would shape the battles yet to come. And somewhere in the lingering darkness beyond the cliffs, even as the predator was restrained, subtle traces of a larger network hinted that this confrontation was only a piece of a more intricate, sinister puzzle. The game was far from over, but for the first time, Liana felt that they had the strength, instinct, and unity to survive it. The night air was thick with tension as Liana, Kale, and Kalen prepared for what could be the most dangerous pursuit of their lives. The predator who had orchestrated weeks of humiliation, terror, and manipulation had been cornered once at the cliffs, but the mastermind was clever, resourceful, and far from defeated. Every instinct screamed that the final act of this deadly game was about to begin. Kale stood at the edge of the planning table, his golden eyes glowing with controlled fury. "They've made mistakes," he said, tracing the map of the city and surrounding forests with a precise finger. But those mistakes are deliberate. They want to test us one last time, to see how far we will go to stop them. We must anticipate their traps and their moves. One misstep, and they could vanish forever. Liana felt the Omega bond flare within her. Fear mingled with determination, her senses tingling, guiding her through the map, through the flow of energy. And the subtle signs of the predator's patterns. She could feel every nuance in the environment, the smallest shift in the air, the faintest trace of scent, the almost imperceptible vibrations in the ground. Every clue was a thread in a wedge she had to unravel before it was too late. Kaylin, standing nearby, studied the patterns like a master strategist. They're clever, patient, and observant, he said, but we've learned their habits. Their timing and their style. They think in steps, but we can anticipate 3 moves ahead if we stay sharp. Liana, your instincts will be key. They will guide us when logic alone is insufficient. The plan was simple in theory, but deadly in execution. They would separate briefly, covering multiple approaches to flush the criminal out. Every step had to be synchronized, every move precise. The criminal had set traps before, some subtle, others overt. Each designed to instill fear, disorientation, and hesitation. There would be no room for mistakes. As they set out under the cover of darkness, Liana felt her senses extend like threads through the night. Every shadow, every rustle of leaves, every subtle scent became a signal, a warning, a guide, a clue. Kale moved with silent precision, his presence a reassuring anchor, while Kaylin's sharp eyes scanned for anything out of place. Hours passed with tense vigilance. The predator left taunting traces, slight disturbances, cryptic symbols carved into tree bark, signs meant to test their patience. But the trio moved with growing confidence, anticipating each trap, dodging each subtle attempt to mislead them. Liana's Omega senses had become razor sharp. She could almost feel the criminals' thought patterns as they tried to manipulate their hunt. Finally, near the outskirts of the forest where the shadows grew thick and the terrain dangerous, the criminal revealed themselves. A faint shimmer in the moonlight, a barely audible footstep, and Liana's instincts screamed that the predator had made a critical miscalculation. "Here," she whispered, pointing, heart pounding. "They're close, and they're impatient. That's their mistake." Kale's lips curved into a tight, controlled smile. "Patience has been our weapon. Now it becomes theirs downfall." A final confrontation erupted with deadly precision. The criminal attempted to flee, using agility and cunning, but every escape route had been anticipated. Kaylin moved to block one path. Kale cut off another. And Liana's intuition guided them to the perfect position to corner the mastermind completely. The criminal faltered, frustration and fear mingling in their eyes. You can't," they started, but Kale's roar silenced them. The force of his alpha presence palpable and overwhelming. "You endangered lives for your games," Kale said, voice deep, unyielding. "This ends now." In a coordinated strike, the predator was finally captured. Restrained by the combined strength and strategy of Kale, Liana, and Kaylin, the criminal's arrogance and patience had been their undoing. The final hunt had ended successfully, but not without testing every ounce of skill. Patience and courage in the team. As the night air settled, Liana breathed deeply, feeling both exhaustion and a profound sense of empowerment. She was no longer the helpless Omega from the gala. She had grown, survived, and learned the power of her instincts, her bond with Kale, and the strength of unity in the face of cunning evil. Yet even as the predator was secured, she sensed that the shadows would always be watching. The lessons of fear and strategy never truly forgotten. But for now, the immediate threat had ended, and the Alpha King beside her had proven once again that together they were unstoppable. The night was heavy with anticipation, a thick cloak of tension draping over the territory as Liana, Kale, and Kalen prepared for the final act. The weeks of terror, humiliation, and hidden threats had led to this moment. The predator who had orchestrated every calculated move. Every test of fear, every cruel game had finally revealed enough to be cornered. But Liana knew instinctively that this confrontation would demand everything she had learned, and more. The trio moved silently through the forest. The moonlight filtering through the trees in fractured beams. Every sense in Liana's body was alive, attuned to the slightest change in the environment. She could feel the predator's presence like a pulse in the shadows. Faint but deliberate, every rustle of leaves, every whisper of wind carried meaning. This was not just a hunt, it was a battle of wits, instincts, and raw power. Kale's golden eyes burned with intensity, scanning every path, every crevice, every darkened silhouette. "They know we're coming," he murmured, low and controlled. "But impatience will be their undoing. Remember, Liana, your instincts are sharper than you think. Trust them and trust the bond between us." Liana nodded, her Omega senses flaring like fire. She could feel Kale beside her, a constant presence, guiding her without words. Kalen was close, silent. A calculated shadow, ready to act. Together, they were a force of precision, patience, and unity. Everything the predator had underestimated. The first sign of the enemy came as a subtle shimmer in the moonlight. A movement too fluid, too deliberate to be a natural shadow. Liana's heart raced. "There," she whispered, pointing. "They're near, and they're trying to lure us into a trap." Kale's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then we adapt. Move carefully. They may be clever, but we are ready." The confrontation escalated quickly. The predator, masked in black, lunged with speed and cunning, attempting to divide and confuse them. The Kale's alpha power and experience countered every strike. Liana's Omega intuition flared, warning them of every feint, every misdirection, every subtle clue that could betray the predator's next move. Kalen's calculated precision closed off escape routes, forcing the criminal into a corner. The struggle reached a climactic intensity on a cliff overlooking the forest below. Rocks shifted and clattered, wind whipped like a living entity, and the predator's desperate movements betrayed both arrogance and panic. Liana, sensing the opening, signaled Kale with a subtle gesture. Their bond, the unspoken primal connection of Alpha and Omega, flowed through every movement, allowing them to act as one. With a final breath, powerful surge, Kale pinned the predator to the ground, his presence overwhelming and absolute. Liana moved beside him, using her Omega strength and instincts to ensure no escape. Kalen's sharp gaze ensured that every angle was covered. The predator's mask fell, revealing the face of the mastermind, the one who had orchestrated humiliation, threats, and betrayal. Their eyes, once confident and cruel, now reflected fear, frustration, and disbelief. You can't do this, they stammered. Voice faltering. Kale's growl reverberated through the cliffside. You endangered lives. You humiliated an Omega. You tested the Alpha King. This ends tonight. No one harms my mate, and no one escapes justice. Liana, feeling the bond of power and trust with Kale ignite fully within her, stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but filled with authority. Your games are over. Every move, every lie, every cruelty. You will answer for it. And I will make sure of it. The predator struggled, but it was futile. The coordinated strength, instincts, and unity of the Alpha, the Omega, and the Tracker had triumphed. The criminal was secured, restrained, and finally powerless. The long weeks of fear, manipulation, and suspense had culminated in this moment. The predator captured, the threat neutralized. As the wind blew across the cliff, keeps low. Carrying the scent of earth, pine, and freedom, Liana realized the profound transformation she had undergone. She was no longer the timid, humiliated Omega from the gala. She was a partner in power, a bond intertwined with the Alpha King, and a force capable of facing shadows head-on. Kale's golden eyes softened as he turned to her, his hand brushing against hers. You were incredible, he murmured, not just for surviving, but for trusting yourself. For trusting us. Together, we are unstoppable. Liana smiled, exhaustion and triumph mingling. I never imagined I could feel this strong, she admitted. But with you, with our bond, I know we can face anything. Kalen stepped back, his expression a mix of respect and relief. The predator is caught, the immediate danger ended. But remember, strength, vigilance, and unity are what will keep you alive in the long run. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the trio looked out over the territory. The threat had been eliminated, but the lessons, the bonds, and the awakening of Liana's Omega power would remain forever. The Predator's games had ended, but a new chapter of strength, trust, and unwavering connection had begun. For Liana, the humiliation, the fear, and the suspense had forged something unbreakable. And by her side, the Alpha King, golden eyes soft with pride and protection, promised that nothing, no darkness, no predator, no shadow, would ever threaten her again. The hunt was over. Justice had been served. And together, Alpha and Omega stood unshakable, united, and ready for whatever the future might bring.